Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Taylor, and I want to welcome you all to our third marketing workshop. Today's webinar will focus on passenger information. So we're excited to have you here. Next slide. Hopefully you've joined us for the first two in this series. We do have 3 more after this, once a month through June. So you probably know the drill, but if not, we will have an hour-long presentation and then a Q&A, and then time for more participant engagement during a kind of a workshop. So during the presentation, everyone will be muted, and then during the Q&A and workshop, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or jump in with a comment, share your experience. You can put questions and comments in the chat throughout. And like I said, during the workshop portion, we will have around 3 to 5 participants who will share their passenger guide and ask for ideas for improvement. And they were prompted with a few questions. So that's a great way for everyone to see how to put these ideas into practice. The slides and recording of the presentation only will be put on our webinars page, where you can also find the materials from the first 2 sessions. And then please fill out the brief survey at the end so that we can continue to improve. So here you'll see the Zoom participant controls, where you can unmute yourself, start and stop your video, see the other participants, use the chat. And then if you want to share verbally, you can just unmute yourself, or ideally raise your hand and then we can call on you. And if you have any trouble with audio, please put that into the chat. You can also call in by phone if you need to. The information is here. Next slide. So we are National RTAP, the National Rural Transit Assistance Program, and we provide free training materials and technical assistance and webinars such as this one. We do have a review board made up of state DOT and rural and tribal transit agency staff, and we are soliciting nominations for new members. Some of the vacancies start in the fall. So please visit our news page. I will put the link in the chat. If you're interested in joining our review board, it's a really great way for us to hear different perspectives from agencies across the country and how we can be most of service to you all, and through the development of our products and events. Next slide. I know, Selena, you just want to skip over the intro. Don't talk about me. Anyways, Selena is our presenter again, and she is wonderful and has a wealth of experience in marketing for public transportation, especially rural transit. We worked with her in 2014 and 15 to develop our marketing toolkit that's on our website. I'll share that link also. And so really excited to have her doing this series and to have her here today. So I think that's it for me. Selena, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Liz, very much. So their pocket, so that they can refer back to it, to look at a schedule or to see where a particular route goes, something like that. So let's think about what a printed passenger guide needs to do. I mean, above all, it needs to provide a clear overview of your system without overwhelming or confusing. So we need to tell people the things that are relevant and important to most people without just making them go, oh my gosh, transit is just too difficult. I'm not going to think about it. So if you operate fixed route service, that generally means providing a system map or something that shows where your service goes, answers that question, where can I go on transit? It probably means providing schedules, some information about fares, and maybe some really basic how to ride information, things that are relevant to a lot of people: accessibility, bikes on buses, where do you catch the bus, those kinds of things. Also, I am a big proponent of telling people where they can find out more. So we can't tell you everything that you ever wanted to know on this, 11 by 14 sheet of paper, but we can direct you to our website for more details. We can tell you if we have passenger information apps. We can tell you to call customer service if you have questions we haven't answered. So those are important resources to give people. For demand response system, it's not too different, except you don't have schedules to deal with. Still a map to let people know where they can go. Probably some information about eligibility, hours and days of operation. And very importantly, how do you make a reservation for a ride? Do you have to register? How do you go about making that reservation? So that's kind of step-by-step directions for doing that. And again, how do you learn more about the service? So one question that comes up a lot in thinking about passenger guides is, should we do one guide or should we have several for different services? And there's not really a perfect answer for this because it depends. It depends on your individual system. So the questions I usually tell people to ask themselves is, do your services operate as a network? Do people use various services, maybe go from one route to another or go from demand response to fixed route? If that's the case, then one guide makes sense because you want to give them all the information they need to make a trip in one place. If you are really interested in providing the big picture of what your service does, of everywhere that people can go on your system, then one guide makes sense. One guide simplifies distribution because you have one thing to distribute. You can get it out to more places, where if you have 10 different brochures, are you getting them to the right places? Do you need to put all 10 brochures at some places? It's just a lot more questions. And having everything in one guide does have the tendency to encourage people to use your system as a system, to use various services together. Now, let's say you've decided you want to have one piece. Then comes up the question, well, should that piece be a big fold out piece, or should it be a schedule booklet, something little that is just little small pages? And here again, there are questions to ask yourself because it depends. The size and complexity of your system map. I think it's really important to have an overview map, and that's harder to do when you're working in a very small format, like a little booklet. You may only have an 8.5 by 11 or even smaller page to do that on. How many schedules do you have? If you have a whole lot of schedules, then a schedule booklet may begin to make sense because a fold out piece might get too big. But if you only have a few schedules, then of course a fold out piece makes much more sense. Do you want to use the guide as a wall display? Do you want to have the flexibility of maybe, laminating it and putting it up at a social service center or something? That's a lot easier to do with a fold out piece than it is with a booklet. And do you want to have the ability to use the maps and schedules in a coordinated way? Do you want people to be able to look at the system map and look at the schedules together and use it in that way? So those are some questions to ask yourself when thinking about whether you want to have one fold out guide, where people can kind of see everything at a glance, or do you want to have a little booklet that maybe has a system map in the front and then has individual pages for the schedules? Now, let's say you're on the other side of the equation. You're thinking, maybe we don't want one guide for everything. Maybe what we want is a series of guides. When would that be appropriate? Well, that would be appropriate if your services have distinctly different service areas and target markets. Okay, this is an example from Kern County, California. It's a big, huge county system, but it operates sort of in different regions, and people that are going, pretty much everybody's going to Bakersfield in the middle. And so people aren't, traveling a whole lot between the different regions. And so they have a guide for each region. They decided to break it up like that. Other systems might break it up so that there is a guide for each individual route, that just has the schedule for that route in it. So another thing to ask yourself is, if there are too many routes or services to include in a single guide without it becoming really unwieldy, that might be a reason to have individual guides. And if some routes schedules change a lot more frequently than others, so you might have to, routes 1 and 2, you change them every 3 months, but the other routes just stay the same, then you might want to have individual guides because it would simplify your update process. So the way that most systems go, if they decide to go with individual guides, is to have one overview piece, maybe a system map, that just doesn't provide any schedules at all, but maybe provides the system map, and then to have individual schedules that relate to that system map. Okay, so let's talk about some basic design elements. You guys are not graphic designers. I'm not a graphic designer, but it is important that we understand how to work with graphic design in order to make our materials usable, because design and readability really do matter. So let's think about maps. Maps can answer a lot of questions. Above all, they can answer the question, where can I go on transit, by showing what your service area is, whether that service area is demand response or a fixed route service area. For a fixed route system, they can also answer the question, how do I get from here to there? What is the route or routes that connects where I am and where I want to go? And where do I catch the bus? Here are those little bus stop symbols showing where the bus stops are. Can I get to the particular places I want to go by including key destinations, places a lot of people want to go, like colleges and county offices and museums and hotels, right on your maps? That really lets people both orient, because people don't always orient based on streets. Sometimes they orient based on, I live near this school or whatever, but also lets them see that they can get to these key destinations. So in terms of best practices for creating maps, there are some things to keep in mind. One is make it functional. Make sure that type sizes are legible, that the map is readable and useful. Too often I see transit pieces that have maps where someone clearly put a map on it because they thought they were supposed to have a map, almost as a decorative element, because the map isn't usable. The type's too small. There's just not enough information on it. So don't just use a map as a decorative item, make it functional. Use legible type sizes, use color to delineate various routes and services. That makes it easy for people to follow and to relate it to other things in your legend or whatever. Have a clear legend that explains what the elements on the map mean. The route lines, if you have on-demand services, time points, directional arrows, let people really know how to read the map in case they're not familiar. And then use detailed maps. If you have areas where a lot of routes come together, that sometimes that's hard to see on a big map, use detail maps to call those out so that people can see what the transfer points are, how they're going to go between routes. As I said before, showing key destinations is really valuable and important. And maps can show not just fixed route services, but they can be used to show demand response services in combination with fixed route services. And that can really begin to allow people to see how to use your system as a network, because sometimes when we operate the two together, we think, oh, well, people will know they can use one to get to the other. And most often they don't make that jump of realization. So every map is unique. People often ask me, well, how do you design a map? You begin by thinking about what your map needs to communicate. In your particular system, what do you want the map to communicate? Fairly traditional in a fixed route system is that you communicate the routes, you communicate key destinations, and you communicate the places where the routes connect, where people can transfer from one route to another. And maybe you use detail maps to show them some details. Those are kind of basic elements. You can do that in a map like this that is just a map, or you can do it on a map where it is also coordinated with the schedule so that clearly the colors of the routes relate to the colors of the schedules. For a demand response system, a map can do a number of things too. It can communicate what are the boundaries of your demand response service area. What is the area where we will pick you up? But as this route does, it also shows that there are specific destinations outside of that boundary that they will take you to. In this particular case, there are a lot of medical destinations, and many of you probably operate services like that, where you may have places that you go outside of your core service area, and your map can communicate that. This is a map from Concord, New Hampshire, where they have a lot of different zones within a large 2-county service area for their demand response service. And when I first talked with them and I said, well, you know, what is the area you serve? And they said, oh, well, we go everywhere in these 2 counties. And I said, oh, so that means that if I live anywhere in the 2 counties, I can get a ride to anywhere else in the 2 counties. And they said, oh, well, no, it doesn't work like that. And I said, well, how does it work? And after much explanation and talking, we figured out how to show on a map where people can actually travel to. And this is useful to their passengers, but the staff at Concord Area Transit told me it is also incredibly useful to their dispatchers because they never entirely understood it before. This is another demand response map where it combines demand response services and fixed route services. So you can see all of these kind of bubbly areas are areas where you can be picked up by demand response, and the hard lines are fixed routes. And the little call outs tell you what days of the week each service runs, because some only run 1 day a week, others run every day. And so it's using the map to clearly communicate not only where you can go, but when you can go. So those are some thoughts on how you can use maps, that maps don't necessarily just have to be for showing a fixed route. They can show a lot of other information and can become a really valuable piece of your passenger guide. You'll see later how they can also then be used in displays and such. Schedules. When do I catch the bus? Schedules are challenging for people. All of you probably already know this. If someone has to use 2 routes to go somewhere in a fixed route network, generally the way they would need to do it in the old days is look at where they're going and what time they need to be there. Look at what route is going to connect, or routes are going to connect where they are and where they're going. Then they need to figure out where the connection point is. Then they need to look at what time they want to get to where they're going, and therefore what time do they need to make that connection. And that means what time do they need to get to the connection point, and what time do I need to start from my home. That's a lot of thinking. That's hard. That's why trip planners are so wonderful, and why I talked a lot about having a trip planner on your website last time. But that said, we probably do need to have printed schedules still, and we can do things to make them easier to read, to make them as clear as possible. They'll never be easy for people. There will always be people that say, I don't understand it, I don't get it, I don't know how to read this, but we can make it easier. One of the ways that we can do that is simply through the way we design them. And we can do it by using them in tandem with maps. So you can see here that on this map, it shows the time points. It has them numbered, and that they are numbered in the same way on the schedule. So it makes it easier for people to say, okay, I'm in Avery, I'm looking right here, I go right here. I don't have to, look through all the words to try and figure out where I am on the schedule. It makes it pretty simple. We need to clearly define direction, and that means not using words like inbound and outbound that people don't understand, and not just eastbound and westbound, because they don't always understand that either, but using a combination of eastbound and then where it's going from and where it's going to, so that people really can relate to it in the way that they think about things. Making sure that the names for the time points we use are clear and descriptive, not quick abbreviations that might make sense to our dispatchers, but may not make any sense to a novice rider who's not familiar with the system. In this particular case, this is an intercity route, so it has the name of the community and then the specific location where the bus stops, so that someone doesn't have to try and figure that out on their own. Letting people know exactly what days of the week the bus operates. And if the bus operates different hours or different schedules on Monday through Friday and weekends, making sure that that is clearly noted. Okay, so again, we've got a schedule here. In this case, the time points are A, B, C, and D, and then those are clearly shown on the schedule as well. This is another just simpler example of a little system that only has 3 routes. And so it's real easy to use color to relate these schedules to the routes. And in some cases, schedules read across, you put the time points across the top. In other cases, it makes more sense to have it go down. It works better for the format of your guide or the number of lines that you have. And so in this case, the schedules read down. It's just important to design in such a way that it's clear to the reader which way they're reading. That the time points are clearly going down this way and they're reading across for the trip. Now, this is another schedule where the time points go down and you read across, but it is a much bigger one because it is a much longer route. It's a long intercity route, and the schedule shows every bus stop because some of them are quite far apart, and others it's just important to know exactly where they are. But here, the system has done a little thing to help out. In addition to just having the bus stop names listed, over here on the left is a little graphic that shows which community and in what area each bus stop is, so that someone can follow along and go, okay, I'm catching the bus in South Sedona. I'd only need to look at these few bus stops. I don't have to look at the whole list trying to figure out where it is that I am. This, again, is a different kind of schedule. Many of you probably operate service that operates on an hourly clock face headway. And this is a schedule and map for a service like that. It's just a little single bus system that makes 2 loops. And you can see that the bus stop, the times when the bus comes to each stop are actually shown on the map. So even if someone was just looking at the map, they could figure out when the bus comes, but they're also over here then is a little schedule showing at what minutes past the hour the bus comes to each bus stop and exactly where that bus stop is. This is another schedule for an hourly clock face service, but in this case, the bus operates somewhat different hours on Monday through Friday and weekends. So there is a first bus, last bus for each of those days, as well as a column showing the minutes past the hour when the bus serves that particular stop. And there's also some directions here for reading it because we know that people don't always get that. And as I said before at the beginning, design and readability matter. This is a schedule from Victor Valley Transit. This is what their schedules used to look like. They were incredibly text heavy, almost impossible to read. This is the same information, or at least all of it that's worth presenting, presented in a format that is a lot easier on the eye, easier for someone to understand, and clearly tells people the things they need to know without trying to tell them everything that anyone ever wanted to know. And then one of the things that you saw in that last piece that I think is really important is to offer trip planning alternatives. If you are in Google Maps, if you have a trip planner on your website, if there are apps like the Transit app or Google Maps in your area that people are using, let people know about that. Not everyone will be aware that they have that option, and those things are much easier than trying to plan a trip using schedules. So another thing you probably want to tell people in your guide is how much does it cost? And sometimes that can be really simple, but sometimes there's a lot of options and there's more to tell people. So clarity is important. Show people if they have options, if they have different ways they can pay with cash, with an app, using an all-day pass, with a ticket book, let them know what those options are. Show them different fare categories and show them clearly so that it's easy to see if I'm an adult, I'm a student, I'm a youth. And then define what those fare categories are. So if you say senior, tell them what a senior is. Is it 60 plus? Is it 65 plus? Is it 62 plus? I'm always wondering about that. And then if you operate in zones, if you have a zoned fare system, that can be tricky for people to understand. You can show them on a map. You can show them right on the schedules, or in this case, this is a little graphic for a inner city route that actually shows from city to city how much an individual can expect to pay, trying to make that easy for people to understand depending on where they're going. So demand response guides. How do I make a reservation? I've heard people in the past say, well, we just need to give them a phone number. Well, there's always more to it than that. There's always more than the phone number needed. And so in describing a demand response service to someone and how to get to make a reservation, I think it's really important to think like a person who's never used your service before, that has no idea how it works, and try to be clear and complete, but succinct. They're not going to read 12 pages to figure out how to make a schedule. We need to get it down to 1, 2, 3, 4. Focus on the facts that are important to everyone, to most riders, what they need to know, and then refer to your website. If you have a detailed user's manual or for details, rules, and exceptions, refer them to your website for that. So this is a little piece that we put together for a system up in Kenai, Alaska. You have to get registered, you have to buy a punch card, you have to schedule your trip, and you have to be ready for your pickup. Just 4 basic rules. And prior to us designing this, they had a 32-page rider's guide, 32 8.5 by 11 pages. And as I recall, how to make a reservation was on page 17 or something like that. And I'm guessing very few people ever got there. So we were trying to turn that 32-page piece into one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that would give people the information that they needed. They could fold it out and have a little map of the service area and the various zones. They could have how to make a reservation. And then this is a fare chart that tells them how many punches on their punch card will be required to make an individual trip. And then just a few of the most important tips and rules. So everything that was really worth reading in that 32-page document fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So I think it's important to think like that. This is another demand response guide that takes a really similar approach. Here they have a map. Again, we have those outlying destinations. And then just a step-by-step. Who can use it? Eligibility. When does it operate? How do I request a ride? How much does it cost? Those 4 key questions that most people have, along with where can I go on Dial-A-Ride? Another thing to think about in printed information is if you are providing multilingual information, if you live in an area where you have a large Spanish speaking or other non-English speaking population, whenever possible, integrate English and non-English information into a single piece. That will just make your life easier in terms of distribution. Because if you have an English version and a Spanish version, or an English version and a French version, you know, inevitably you're going to end up having too many of one and not enough of another, wherever it is you need to have it. So this is an example. I'm going to go back. You can see right on the cover of this little rider's guide, it says English and Spanish. You go inside and it's got the core information in English on one side and Spanish on the other. Similar approach here. We've got English, we've got Spanish. And then if you look at the schedule, Spanish has been integrated into the headers. So the days of the week, you know, the effective date, the important information that needs to be translated has been translated. But of course, the schedule doesn't need to be translated. That's numbers and names, and those stay the same. So sometimes it's really not that hard to integrate a second language. Now, if you get into 3 or 4 languages, that can get a little tricky. This is just a little flyer, another little information flyer with the schedule that uses that same approach of just integrating the Spanish with the English. Okay, so we got a passenger guide. Let's talk about how we can use that passenger guide promotionally. More is just a piece of information, but actually as a tool for building awareness for our system. And we can do that through broad distribution by getting our passenger information out into places in our community where a lot of people are going to see it. And that can be done with little displays like this, little countertop displays. And I will tell you that these little plastic units, they cost about $8 a piece, less if you buy more than 10. And you can put an 8.5 by 11 poster in it, and then put a supply of your brochures. They're great for doctor's offices, for government offices, maybe for the counter at a school or college, lots of different places, social service offices that these can work. This is just another style, a little bit different version of the same thing. This is a larger permanent information display. This fixture would cost a bit more, maybe in the $100 to $200 range. The one you're looking at here was at a community college, and it was a permanent fixture at several different points around the college. There were these displays, which had a system map, told people how to get information in Google Maps, and reminded them that they could use their college ID to ride the bus. These kind of displays have long-term value. You might spend $100 to $200 to create them, a little bit more for the poster, but they are there day in, day out, being seen by hundreds of people. And one of the great things about them is that you can customize displays like this for the particular audience that's going to see them. So if it's at a hospital, you can customize it for the types of people that would be coming to the hospital. If it's at a college, you can customize it for the students, as you saw on the one before. At a social service agency, you can customize it for that population. So that gives you a real advantage to get more value out of them wherever it is you're putting them. And there really are a lot of opportunities for these sorts of displays. And I think a lot of times we don't take full advantage of them. I do a lot of executive interviews with say social service agency managers. And one of the most common things I get is, we would love a nice big display for our lobby to tell people about transit. For a few $100s, you could have something that would be there long-term, not just an ad in the paper for a day or two. So bus stop signage is the next thing that I want to talk about. Bus stop signs serve a variety of purposes. One of them we talked about when we talked about awareness back in our first class, that they are 24/7 advertising. They tell people that transit is available to a particular point or along a particular corridor. They also let people know that they're in the right place to catch the bus. That big bus symbol does that. And they are a way to connect people with additional resources by giving them your website address, by giving them your phone number, by having a QR code they can click on. So bus stops serve a number of different functions. Just the basic bus stop sign itself is a passenger information tool. But, oh, I had more examples to show you. But there are times when you want more than just a bus stop sign. And the passengers those are particularly important for are new riders, people that are just not familiar with the system, tourists or transient users, people that are maybe just traveling through an area and only going to be using the bus for a day or two, so they haven't had a lot of time to learn, and spontaneous riders, that person whose car broke down and suddenly they need to ride the bus, or the kid who, you know, their mom isn't going to give them a ride today and they decided they need to ride the bus. So, you know, for those populations, you might want a little more information at the bus stop. And there are different levels of information that we can consider providing. One is just the basic, and this is just a mock-up, but what routes serve this stop? You know, which routes come here and where do they go? Just really basic information. Somebody walking by sees that, and it's an awareness builder that, oh, I could go there on the bus. For the person who's coming to catch the Route 100, it's a confirmation that the bus actually comes there. Where does this bus go and when? This is from Brunswick, Maine. And this is just it's a single route system. It's just one little route, runs on a clock face headway. And this is a simple little sign that shows where you are on the route, Bowdoin College, when the bus comes to that stop, and then shows you the other places that it goes from there. So just very, very simple piece of information that anybody coming to the bus stop can understand. This is another kind of when is the bus coming type of information. This is from Needles, California. And these are decals that are applied to a standard sign that show which times the bus come to that particular stop. And these are the kind of things that you can produce in Publisher, which I'm going to talk about a little later. Just print out on a decal and put onto a standard sign. Taking that where can I go and from here question and wanting to answer it in a little more depth, I'm going to show you a couple of pieces. This one is from a tourist-oriented community, Mammoth Lakes, California. where people come there to ski and they use transit to get around. So this is a piece that has a standard map on it in the header, but then these little decals are added digitally. And so every bus stop at every stop has the specific information for that stop. And I'm going to show you in a little bit about how you can create that kind of customized information for the bus stop really easily and inexpensively using Publisher. So we'll come back to that in a minute. This is another example of a sign like that. This is from a not tourist area. This is Calaveras County, California, but it's the same approach. They have 8.5 by 11 by 17 panels at their bus stops. They all have a system map with the "You Are Here" designation, and then they show which routes are going to come by that stop and when. They also have a QR code that people can use to click on and get real-time information. And they have a little information here about using their mobile ticketing app. So they've sort of taken technology and are trying to educate their community about the various kinds of technology they've put in place to make using transit easier. Both of those last two signs I showed you are based on using these kind of changeable information panels. These particular panels are available from a company called Transit Information Products. Fancy name, kind of like my name, Transit Information Products. And they sell these high impact sign frames in just every possible size you can imagine. They lock with a particular kind of little wrench. They can be put up on various kinds of poles that you already have. So they're an easy way to provide customized information at the bus stop. This is just an example of a similar kind of panel put up in the back of a shelter, maybe at a transfer point where you wanted a larger sign so that you could show all the various routes that came there. And then this is an example, many of you, if you have a transit center, that transit center will have come equipped with built-in passenger information fixtures that it's then up to you to figure out what to put in. And this is just an example of a large screen printed passenger information display that is put up in a changeable information panel. So I've shown you a lot of things. I'm hoping that they're getting your creative juices running in terms of thinking about what your passenger information can do, but they're also probably bringing up a lot of questions about how are we going to do that? How can we go about doing that? So some technical tips. First of all, on the RTAP website, there is a marketing toolkit that Liz mentioned earlier, and it has a bunch of tools in it that can help you with this. There are templates for creating maps and schedules using Publisher and Excel, two Microsoft Office products that probably all of you have. And I'm going to also talk to you a little bit about using Publisher to customize bus stop displays. So the templates that are in the toolkit, they're like this, they're things like this that just kind of show you how a passenger guide might be laid out. It's easy enough in the templates. As I said, they're in Publisher to go in to replace this little funky logo with your own logo, to replace this table with your own schedule. You may need to adjust sizes and things a bit, but we've given you a lot of variety to at least help get you started. In the toolkit, there is also instructions for how to make a map in Publisher. It is clunky. I will not tell you that it isn't. It is a little time consuming, but you can make a decent looking route map in Publisher, and you can create nice, well-designed schedules in Excel and import them into your Publisher pieces. So it includes directions for doing all of that. You can also create maps in Google Maps, in My Maps. But they are not print quality maps. They're maps that look like this. Now, what they can be good for is to provide to a graphic artist as a starting point for creating a route map for you. So if you kind of draw out the route map in Google Maps, at least they know what it is you want to show in your map. And they can also be a good place for you to begin if you're going to try and create a map in Publisher as something to trace over, to put in as a background element and then trace over so that you make sure that you get your routes in the right places and the right alignment. I will tell you though, that creating maps, you know, most of you probably do not, when a bus breaks down, go out and try to fix it yourself. I'm guessing you probably hire a mechanic to do that. And creating maps is a little like that. I highly recommend investing in a little bit of graphic design assistance for your passenger information tools. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to, you know, have a full-time artist that creates stuff for you. You can have someone work with you to create the key elements that you need. That would specifically be a map, what your schedules are going to look like, any other key graphics that you want to use in your passenger information tools, and then have them give you those elements as JPEGs, as vector art, EPS files, and the native files, the Adobe Illustrator files, so that you have them for future modifications. Because once you have those pieces, you can repurpose them for lots of different things. Okay, and I'm going to show you in a minute how you can go about doing that. But places where you can get some help with creating those elements are community colleges. If they have a graphics class at your community college, see if maybe you can hire some of the students to help you out, or the instructor might even be willing to make it a class project. Almost every community has freelance graphic artists. And I'm not talking about big design firms or ad agencies, but freelance graphic artists will work with you for a reasonable rate to help you develop materials. And if you establish a relationship with someone, you know, they can kind of be adjunct staff over time. There are free graphic software packages. There are alternatives to Adobe Illustrator for making maps and graphics, things like Inkscape and Gravit. There's a mapping tool called Mapline, although I'm not entirely sure that you can do a system map in it. It's more for doing site maps and things. But I will tell you that all of these things have a steep learning curve. I have tried using them and just give up. So unless you want to take some time to educate yourself about being a graphic artist, it really is worthwhile asking for a little help with this. But if you do have a graphic artist work with you, say to help develop a passenger guide or the key elements of a passenger guide, you can then take those pieces and reuse them. So this is a passenger guide for Trinity Transit, very small system in California. See this little map here? This is their system map. Here that map is reused on their website. That map is reused on displays at the bus stop, and it's reused in their ads. So they got their money's worth out of that little map graphic that they had designed by a graphic artist. And I highly recommend thinking about your tools that way, getting someone to work with you to create the pieces so that maybe then you can customize them to create individual materials. Now, I showed you these signs before, these two passenger information panels, and I said I was going to tell you how I did them. In this case, the graphic artist designed this background. Okay, so it's a header, it's got a map, it's just one 8.5 by 11 piece of a graphic. Imported it into Publisher as a JPEG, put it in the background image, and then added stuff to it. Added these little blocks, added times about for specific bus stops, added little badges about dial-a-ride service. This area was my area, in this case, to work with. Now it belongs to the system, and they can easily go in and simply update and change these times as they need to, change out the badge if they want to. It makes for an easy customizable piece. So sometimes when you think, oh, we have to create a different panel for every bus stop, that's going to be a huge project. It is, and I'm going to try and show you, this is Publisher, and you can see how, if you look down, are you guys still seeing my screen, Liz?
Yes.
Okay, good. There is a panel here for each and every bus stop. And so they all have that same background image, but then they have different information added to them. Okay. Back into PowerPoint. Same thing done here with the one that I was talking about over in Mammoth Lakes. So they created them in Publisher, and then they printed them out on a digital printer in their offices, might have had them laminated because it snows a lot there, and then put them in these 11 by 17 sign holders. So it is doable to have customized information. I already told you how to get some design assistance. These are the two programs I was talking about, Inkscape and Gravit Designer. I've downloaded both of them, played with them a little bit, and I'd still recommend going out and hiring a graphic artist if you're able to at all, unless you just really want to teach yourself. In terms of costs, if you do decide to hire a graphic designer, I ask the designer that I usually work with to give me some ballpark budgets. Now, I will tell you, he's very experienced. He's not going to be the cheapest alternative. You can probably do better than these budgets, but this is what he told me, that to do a fixed route guide, a complete guide with a system map and schedules and fares and general information, really nice little guide for a 4 to 5 route system, he estimated the graphic cost would be $2,500 to $5,000. For a 10 to 12 route system, so a significantly bigger system, $5,000 to $8,000. And if you're only wanting someone to do a map, probably plan to budget between $250 and $500 per route, because the more routes you have, of course, the more complex the piece becomes. In terms of a demand response guide, where you don't have schedules, you just have a service area map, fares, that could be as little as $500 or as much as $2,000, depending on the size and the complexity of the amount of information that you want to include. So hopefully that'll just give you some ideas, but I tell you that graphic artists, it really depends on your community and the person you're working with. So I highly recommend that you do a little exploring in your own community to see what's available. So customer information apps, we've been talking printed, old school information up till now. Let's come back into the 2022 and talk a little bit digitally. So what are apps? Well, apps don't take the place of your website. We talked last week about last month about how your website needs to be mobile friendly. So you don't necessarily need to have an app for that. They don't take the place of printed schedules or customer service. But what apps do is some specific functions very well. They provide information quickly and easily on a mobile device. That is what apps do. And for people that rely on their phones for everything, apps can be a great way to get information to them. The things they do well, trip planning, obviously, Google Maps. They allow people to compare modes, so they can look at how long is it going to take me to drive versus transit. They provide real-time information well. They can provide trip requests for demand response. Mobility as a service, which is basically all of these things put together, and fare payment. Apps can do those things well. So the most common apps, the ones that probably we all need to be promoting if we offer fixed route service, are trip planning apps, because again, they keep people from having to figure out how to read schedules. The most useful trip planning apps are ones that are GTFS based. That's like Google Maps, okay? So the ones that are based on your GTFS, that are already broadly used by customers. Better if people don't have to go out and get a specific app just for your system. If they're already using Google Maps, they're already using the Transit app or Move It, great, then take advantage of those apps if they're available in your community. They also work across systems, which is a real advantage. So if you connect with other transit agencies that are also in Google Maps or in one of these other apps, people can plan trips across your systems. They're public and free, and they're continually updated and improved with no effort from you other than making sure your GTFS is up to date. So those are the advantages of using those kind of trip planning apps. And this is just an example of Google Maps in the image here. As I said before, in addition to trip planning, they can allow people to compare modes, compare driving versus transit. They can, if you've included fares in your GTFS, they can actually show what the fares are. People can have the instructions read to them, which is an advantage if someone is blind. They can incorporate real-time information. So if you have real-time GTFS going into Google Maps, it can show the real-time information, and fare payment can be integrated now with Token Transit is integrated both into Google Maps and into the Transit app. Real-time apps, apps that are specifically designed to deliver real-time information. The Transit app is probably the most popular one. Move It, Google Maps do the same thing. They just really make it easy for people to walk up to a bus stop, look at the app, and see when is the next bus going to be here. The transit app does it by showing estimated times. Some other apps like Transloc do it by actually showing a map where you can see where the vehicle is. And then, of course, those of you that operate demand response services, there's a whole host of new apps that people can use to request trips. The Spare app, Transloc, Trapeze, everybody seems to have one. There aren't any of the public free kind of apps like Google Maps for fixed route, but there are quite a few that can help make demand response service easier to use. And even for people that don't want to use an app, there are, of course, systems that automatically call people to confirm reservations and to let them know when their ride is on the way. So if you have any of these apps available, if you're using them, I highly recommend promoting them in your printed materials, in your guide, because this gives people an easier way and a new way that maybe they're not familiar with to access your transit system. So the final thing I want to talk about, and I'm only going to talk briefly because this is more your area of expertise than mine, is frontline staff. Because for some riders, transit employees are a primary source of passenger information. They're either going to ask the driver or they're going to call up and ask someone in customer service. Fewer and fewer people, rely on frontline employees as their primary information source, but everybody relies on them sometimes when they're confused or lost or, things just haven't gone according to plan. So I think it is important to make it an explicit part of the job for frontline staff to make sure that they understand, bus operators in particular, that answering questions is part of the job. It's not just an annoyance that keeps you from driving, but is actually part of the job. And make sure that it's included in their training, that they're not just trained on the particular service they're operating, but that they have a fairly broad understanding of the system. And if they don't know every detail, that they do know where to refer people to get the information. So frontline staff are a very important part of the passenger information milieu that we can take advantage of. So just in quick summary, remember that passenger information is sometimes the first passenger experience that someone has with your system. It's the directions for using your service. It's a fundamental marketing tool. It really is critical. It's why we spent 2 whole webinars talking about it. Website is the Swiss Army tool that is going to be how you tell people everything they ever want to know. The passenger guide is how you're going to give them that nice introduction to the system without overwhelming them, just giving them the key facts that they need. Community information displays are going to help you build awareness for your service. Bus stops are going to serve their very particular functions of making people aware that service exists, letting them know where to wait, and then maybe providing a bit more information. Apps are going to help with trip planning and reservations. And frontline staff are going to wrap it all up with a smile and good answers to the questions that people have. With that, I am going to turn it back to Liz. I think I actually finished on time. Woohoo! And we'll take your questions because I'm sure you have some.
Okay, thanks so much, Selena. That's great. I'm going to allow people to unmute yourselves. So feel free to put questions about the presentation in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask verbally. I will, while you all are thinking of your questions, refer to there's some great information in the chat. One is about where they text a number at the bus stop and get a text back with when the next bus is coming. And there was a question, Edie, if you're able to answer that, about whether it's an automated system. I'm guessing that that's the case, or if there's a live person on the other end texting back. So if you're able to answer that, that'd be great. And then just some other tips about waterproof paper. So I love, Selena, that you give, the specific like the materials that you use and where to get it so that people really know how to take this information and work with it.
And I saw
So-
somebody actually put John at transitproducts.com address in there. Thank you, John Webb. Yes, he's a terrific guy.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions, but oh, okay, it is automated. Yeah, just text back the bus stop and the next time. And Edie, is that based on AVL? Is that the actual where it is, or is that just the schedule? I'm guessing it's okay, AVL, great, that's awesome. Okay, well, if nobody has any questions right now, we can move along, but at any time, feel free to put a question into the chat or raise your hand, and we can address that. But we'll keep moving. So next slide. Okay, so in case some people have to leave before we get to the workshop portion, we wanted to just mention some of the other upcoming events. So I have listed the next three, the second half of this series. The next is going to be on April 5th on community-based marketing, and then transit passenger research in May, and improving the passenger experience in June. And then in response to kind of the last webinar in February on websites, and sort of this one too, talking about Website Builder and GTFS Builder, which are free national RTAP tools to host a website or to get your route and schedule data into the general transit feed specification, which then can be used in Google Maps and all those other trip planning tools that Selena mentioned. So we're going to have kind of an introduction to those, and also some specifics about schedules and maps on websites and things like that. And then we will be doing a 3-series workshops on GTFS, helping you actually use the tool to get one of your routes into GTFS. And the third of those I don't think is required. It's more just there to, if you want to come with questions and help. So the registration for all of these events is on, or for the ones that are live, there are some that are just save the date, are on our website.
And I think it's fabulous that RTAP is offering these more technical classes, because I know you guys asked me questions that I wasn't able to answer when we were talking about websites from a marketing point of view. And this will give you the real hands-on information to implement some of the ideas.
Yeah, great. Okay, next slide. And then these are just a couple of other upcoming events. We do have next week a Building Better Bus Stops. So that's the planning and partnership side, but then when you build it, you can get some great marketing materials on it. And then we have one about transit insurance and risk management later in the month. And we have 3 upcoming roundtables and chats. So register for all those on our website, and hope to see you there. Next slide. Okay, so now we're gonna go into the workshop section. I know there's like 3 or 4 individuals who volunteered.